Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining our sports psychology and sports science webinar. Very exciting topic today. For those who don't know me, my name is Priyanka Chadha. I work with Motorsport Australia and I manage our participation programs such as Girls on Track. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that we are all dialing in from, and I'd also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. I'd also like to thank Super Cheap Auto, who are presenting this webinar today. I'll now hand over to Charlie Bullis, who will lead tonight's conversation.
Thanks, Priyanka. Hello, everyone. I hope you are well wherever you are. Kotryna and I are very, very excited to be here and just really get our motorsport geek on tonight and talk all things motorsport psychology, sports psychology, and sports science. So if we haven't met at a racetrack around Australia before, my name's Charlie Bullis. I work for Supercars as a digital content producer, which is just a posh way of saying that I'm a journalist and a presenter. It just makes me sound more intelligent, and I'm all about that. I'm a proud Girls on Track champion, as well as I know Kotryna is. So if you don't find me at a racetrack, you certainly see me at a Girls on Track event, both Pathways and Inspire, which we had last week, and I'm still on a high from it. So I welcome you to please pop your questions in the chat and we will get to them as soon as we are able. But it is my honest pleasure to invite Dr. Kotryna Fraser, I'm sorry, make sure I get that correct, to our conversation. Kotryna, welcome.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Charlie. It's a great pleasure to be here tonight.
Wonderful. Well, let me just introduce you a little bit more in a professional sense. So you're a sports psychology specialist and lecturer currently at the University of Sydney. A little bit more about your professional background. You've also been a lecturer at the University of Edinburgh and the University of Newcastle. However, that's the one in New South Wales, not the one in the UK. So let's just make sure we got that correct about where you were in the world. As a sports psychology specialist, Kotryna provides one-on-one mental skill training interventions for professional and semi-professional athletes from a variety of sports. So these interventions include planning, goal setting, self-confidence, emotional regulation, and intention control. As I'm sure we can all understand, that athletes have to be really on top of all of those things. You've designed and delivered educational workshops for teams and younger athletes in conjunction with their coaching staff. And your clients include the Scottish Hockey, GB Climbing, FIA Excellence Academy, and many more sports from local clubs. And a fun fact that I found on your LinkedIn is that you were a swimming teacher alongside your training as a psychologist. So you were training young athlete swimmers on how to swim and then also training their minds as well. And you worked with quite young children, which is really interesting.
The youngest person I've ever taught swimming was probably 3 months old. And the oldest, 83.
Wow, that's incredible. Like I remember I took my son swimming at 3 months old, and it was an experience. Let's just put it that way. They scream pretty much the entire time. So I take my hat off to you for wanting to teach a 3-month-old swimming. But yeah, let me just let's talk about you in a non-professional sense. So tell us. Obviously, you've got a university behind you. Where is that in the world?
So that's University of Sydney, actually. So it's here in Australia, in Sydney.
So you can tell I've never been there. So just move on. I'm not as educated. But in your non-professional life, what do you get up to away from sports psychology?
It's an excellent question. In all honesty, I don't know. I really, really don't know, because I love my subject. I love my work. I love my job. I love talking about it. I research in it. I do some outreach projects, including Girls on Track. But what I really like doing, I guess, it's a little bit practice what you preach. I do get up in the morning and do my exercise, and I block that time to do it. I hated running when I was an athlete myself. I absolutely hated running. I was a swimmer, but now I really enjoy running as a way of almost meditation, as relaxing me time. It's protected me time, and being outdoors. Australia is lovely for that. I absolutely love Australia, just being outdoors, soaking the sun, being outside, hiking, spending some time with friends, exploring Sydney after being on the Central Coast during the pandemic as well. It's nice to be back in the city and just finding out more what's happening in the city, what the city has to offer. So yeah, I guess that's how non-academic, non-professional me looks like. Somewhere out there doing things.
And you're originally from Lithuania, aren't you?
Yes, that's right.
So
that's right.
When did you move over, and yeah, how did that all come about for you?
So actually, I stopped by Scotland for 11 years. So I finished high school in Lithuania, and then I moved to Scotland to pursue my education. And I knew that I wanted to do sports psychology. The one path to get into that is psychology. The other path is sports sciences. I didn't really know what sports sciences was. I knew what psychology was. So I just went for that. I got in, I did my joint honors. I kind of hated university experience to some extent because I find it was very difficult. I almost dropped out from that. But that vision, where I want to go in my life, really kept me going. So that was in St Andrews, University of St Andrews in Scotland. Some of you might know St Andrews for golf because it's the capital of golf, but it's nothing what to do over there. So then I moved to Edinburgh, to University of Edinburgh, to do my master's in performance psychology. And this is where I really found passion for sport, again, for sports psychology, and I loved it. I loved every single day of that course. I loved my thesis by research. I loved the topic I was researching. I loved the experience of research, and I just fell back in love with sport and sports psychology. So one work led into another one. I started PhD. I was working as a swim teacher and a swim coach for quite some time. During that time, I started my training as a sports and exercise scientist, and my specialist was applied sports psychology. So specifically to work, hands-on, not only with athletes, with coaches. So we have to remember that coaches, support staff, they're part of the performance environment, teams as well. So even when you look at motorsport, right, you've got so many people working around the race driver, and they have to remember that. So it's not only the race driver themselves, it's actually all the people around them, getting them to work together. So all those different topics. So I finished my PhD. I was looking for work. And I said, enough is enough. I want some sunshine. I want some difference. I packed my bag. I got a job at University of Newcastle for 2 years. And I thought, you know what? It's going to be my overseas experience. I shifted 5 boxes, packed 2 suitcases, came here with one friend living in Sydney, started my new job at Orumba, Central Coast. So I was based at Orumba campus, which was a big shock to the system, with no car in the middle of nowhere. But it was sunny, I guess. It was July, so it's 3 years, this time 3 years. Felt into love with Central Coast, with Australian lifestyle, just being by the beaches, being surrounded by that environment, started doing more and more running, got into road cycling. But then the pandemic started. So it was quite difficult because it was really difficult to network, to find like-minded people, and just, I guess, live your life the way you want to live it, especially in a new country. But I was lucky because the pandemic worked out best for me. It was actually the best possible outcome for myself, because that meant that universities were going through restructuring, positions open up, and I just fell into this job at University of Sydney, which was a perfect match for me, an absolute perfect match. One thing led to another one. Girls on Track UK asked to interview me as well for one of the similar webinars, and then they put me in touch with Priyanka, and then I came to Sydney Motorsport Park. I met you guys, then I met some other colleagues actually working currently with and working hands-on with race drivers. So I actually met someone who works from the Focus performance driving, Ollie Mares himself. So that was a really nice introduction, and actually bringing sports sciences to that a little bit more and expanding the horizons, and just doing that. And fast forward to today, I'm here talking to you.
I know we're gonna need way more than an hour. So Priyanka, we're just gonna keep going until we've delved into absolutely everything Kotryna can tell us, because there's so much there. And I don't blame you about living in Scotland and thinking, yeah, sunshine's the way to go. Absolutely. But I have to ask, so going from being an athlete yourself, as you said, you're a swimmer, and then coaching other swimmers, and then moving into other sports, as you said, you fell back into love with sports psychology and sports science. So where does the passion for motorsport come in? Where did that kind of stem from?
It's an excellent question. And I have to be honest, I don't know. I really don't know. I fell into that. I had an opportunity to contribute to FIA Excellence Academy in Edinburgh back in God knows how many years ago. Because my lecturers, my colleagues were part of sports science team, and were part not only of selection for the academy, but once all the drivers were selected, delivering all the workshops. So this is where I got my hands on working with the drivers and getting much more exposure to motorsport, what's behind the closed doors. And that was very interesting for me, because since I guess starting my training in sports psychology and performance psychology, I look at sports with different eyes. It's not only just looking at race driver on the track and how fast are you, how are you getting into the corners, how many accidents were there. And my father looked of watches F1 for the accidents and speed and all that. I watch it from different point of view, and that was really interesting. So that word opened up to me, and then I saw so many different opportunities, so many unexplored opportunities, so much potential, and such unique context. Because, you know, being a swimmer myself, it's a very simple example. Go and find a swimming pool, literally everyone, every single corner, right? So I can trade day in, day out. You know, I can do so much knowledge when it comes to mainstream sports, right? Going to motorsport, but it's not only not many opportunities to practice, they're very expensive, and the consequences can be, you know, really serious consequences. So many different factors which come to that. So for me, it's more about how do we introduce that knowledge we have into this unique context to make sure that not only the race driver is performing safely and at optimum, but the whole environment around them is trying to achieve what we can achieve, and just providing that knowledge and, I guess, experience more than anything.
Wow. Yeah, we're going even way long. I'm like digging in like this. This is so good. So how does, you know, you said there's some untapped things, and you also see motorsport through different eyes. Like, yes, I watch it because I love the people. That's what I love. I love the fact that even though, yes, there's one driver in the car, for me, motorsport is a team, massive team sport. Mm-hmm. There's so many cogs and little pieces that a lot of us don't even realize happen, that completely outside of the race car. So yeah, explain to us how you see motorsport through different eyes.
Where do I start, honestly? if you are my student, you would know I'm not going to shut up until someone tells me to shut up. I've got so much to I guess to share. But what I see a driver in that car, right, who goes and performs, who needs to take in feedback through the ears, understand, process that, and respond in a safe manner. Because it's not only safety issue for them, it's also safety issue for everyone around them, right? Because you can't be stupid. If you're rushing, if you're impatient and you're making stupid decisions, you're not only putting yourself at risk, you're putting other people at risk, right? So that's part of what I see. Are you being patient, impatient? Are you being a little bit, you know, hot-headed more than anything, and just really trying to sometimes overcompensate, right? So research tells us if we make a mistake, we're really trying to overcompensate in our next move. And that's what we see with drivers, right? So when we make a mistake on one corner, the next one is going to be much more aggressive, much more difficult, the way we approach that is going to be different from the expectation, because we just really want to make it happen rather than stepping back a little bit and working one step at a time. You've got other hurdles in your way, other cars, don't let you pass. You've got strategy. Younger drivers don't recognize that. They say, oh, I don't have any strategy, but you always have a strategy. It's that strategy is going to change depending what's happening around you. You've got different conditions, right? You've got things like, are you hydrated enough? Are you performing in the wet conditions? Are you performing somewhere in the oven in the heat? How your body is reacting? The temperature in the car can get to 40, 50 degrees. It's bloody hot. So what you're going to do about it, what decisions you're going to make, how that is going to, how heat and dehydration is going to influence your decision making, right? So that's the driver, right? Then you also have the team around them. You've got the engineer talking to them, wanting feedback, right? So the driver has to understand the car has to respond in a way that they can communicate with each other. So when you look at team sports, yes, we use 1, 2, 3 words, phrases or words or keywords as we call them to convey meaning, strategy we want to implement, but that takes time to develop. So many times an engineer would use a word to describe one situation, one thing, and the driver have slightly different understanding of what it is, right? So you really have to communicate with each other. And then team around them, like mechanics, pit stops, if pit stops are there, depending on what league you're talking about, right? All the team has to come together. And then outside that, if the team is not happy because the driver is being very egocentric, self-focused, however you want to call them, right? They're less willing to work on that car over time, because the driver is not nice to them. So when you're talking about those relationships between the driver and the team, because the driver has to perform, but the driver has to understand that it's their job to actually build that rapport, those relationships and culture around them. So those are little things which I see when I look at motorsport, when I watch motorsport.
Now that's all I'm going to see. And that's amazing. I feel more smarter already. Thank you so much. So is there a specific example that you could share with us working with a motorsport athlete? What were maybe some of the activities that you did, workshops that you might have undertook with them, and perhaps any results that you saw along the way?
I'm going to share a couple examples from most of my recent work. And I was thinking what examples I would like to share. Obviously, when we're talking especially about sports psychology, there's still a little bit of stigma, what it is, what is not, and confidentiality is a big thing. So, being just respectful of that more than anything. One way or one thing which I have worked with one of my drivers, one of my clients, is how to deal with pressure. Right? So my colleague comes in and says, listen, I've got this driver who's wanting to see you. I don't know why. When they see them race, they look spot on. They look good. I don't know I want to see you, but clearly we want to see you. Then I go in and talk to the person. There are a lot of self-pressure happening. It's a lot of, beating yourself up to the extent that you're overthinking, and you might come across as you're cool, or maybe even you don't care, but that's only part of your picture, right? So you don't know what's happening inside. So some of the clients I work with, they're so intense, they're so focused, and they're so really wanting to make it happen. But one thing we work with them on is how to step back and learn how to unplug when it's time to unplug. They're very quick to say focus, but we need a permission, we need to learn then it's okay not to focus, because it's time to relax, it's time to rest. Sure, you go and do your qualifiers, your practice, whatever it is you do on the track. Just before you go there, you're focused on the track, you come out, you might need a little break, whatever you do, you focus again to do a debrief, data analysis, whatever it is, you go and chill for a little bit. So you don't need to think about it all the time, because essentially what happens is you burn out. You don't have this mental capacity to think about it and make a good decision when it counts. And when does it count? When you're on track. This is when it counts. So just giving them tools to cope with that pressure, without even anxiety, with expectations of other people and expectations of themselves, how to manage that, how to deal with that. And I guess it's very hard to track progress on anything because of how subjective the field can be. But this particular person came out from one race and said, you know what, maybe it wasn't a good race because I had an accident or this happened, that happened. So technically speaking, it wasn't the best race it could have been. But I was in such a good psychological state, but I feel it was a good race. Because the way I approached the race was good. I managed myself really well. How I reacted and responded was, I'm very proud of myself, how I managed to improve. And that's the part you don't see. Can I give you another example, which is maybe a little bit less?
Absolutely. You can give as many examples as you like. I think I'm going to have to get a neck brace for how much nodding I'm doing, because this is just so unbelievably interesting. So yeah, you go for as long as you like.
I'll give you a short, different example from a demo driver, just to illustrate the point that it's not only what happens on the racetrack is important. This person had a big turn, basically, in terms of how the season is going to start out. And the things we've been working with this person on is planning, goal setting, not only for the race, but more about, okay, so what you're going to do today? What do you have to do today to make it count? Are you going to try to find sponsors? Are you going to go train? And by training, we mean maybe jump on the bike, maybe go do swimming, maybe do some gym session, that type of training. Okay, so you don't have access to the car to go on the track and do test days, and test days some that are in the future, maybe not. What can we do to help you to maintain your skills? Okay, let's work on imagery. Let's use imagery as a quick practice rate. Let's go on the sim. When you're done with sim, let's try to do that. But it's mostly, how do we help you to navigate the daily challenges, spinning multiple plates at the same time? And probably yourself, when you get so anxious, just so much you can do, right? You can't really perform. You don't know if you're going to go on the track, when you're going to go. So how we manage all those expectations, relaxation skills, meditation a little bit. So that's a complete opposite example because it's off the track. But I just want to illustrate that there's just so much happening with the performer, with the race driver, which is very, very important. Schoolwork, union work, something else, how do you make it full time?
Absolutely. And as you're sort of, as a driver, you're climbing through those ranks. Say you're gone from being a karter, you might have then gone into Excels, you might then go into Super 3 or Super 2 if you're on the supercars path, that is, and you might be holding down a full-time job while you're doing all of this, while you're trying to make this career happen. So absolutely, there's as we say, there's so much that goes on off the track in order to get them on the track. Yeah, wow. Yep. Gosh, I hope everyone's getting questions in. I've got thousands. So let's talk about your career. How did you pursue a career in sports psychology and science? Oh, have we lost you, Kotryna? Can you hear us? Just a moment. Priyanka, can you hear me? Just to check whether...
Yes, I think it's the headphones.
Oh, the headphones decided to...
I'm kind of blown away right now, aren't you?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So sorry, I completely didn't hear what you said because my headphones died.
At the perfect time.
Yeah, we were just saying we're kind of blown away, the both of us, by everything you're saying. So wait, we leave you to it. You can go.
Yeah, absolutely. No, sorry. Yes, so I'll repeat, but I was just saying pretty much, yeah, there's so much that goes on off the track, as if you're in the development series and perhaps, yeah, heading down a supercars route, for example, you might be holding down a full-time job while you pursue your motorsport aspirations. So yeah, to be able to deal with all of that so that when you do get the opportunity to get in a seat and be in a car, that you can perform at your best ability. It's just, there is so much to unpack here. And I'm just going to have to go to uni and take this entire course, I've decided, because it's just so interesting. But let's talk a little bit more about you. So how did you, or what did you study? How did you pursue a career in sports psychology and sports science?
So I went to Scotland, as I mentioned, and I did undergraduate in psychology. Part of that, I was like, I'm quite a smart cookie. I liked maths at school, and I had a choice of doing joint honors. So I was like, why not? I'm going to do a double degree. So I actually did mathematics and psychology, which really helped me with the way I think. It really helped me to understand not only numbers, but develop my logic more than anything. So I really appreciated that. From there, I moved on to do my master's in performance psychology. So performance psychology is a little bit broader than sports and exercise psychology. It's essentially the same concepts applied to different settings. So for example, opera singers, ballet dancers, military personnel, they're all performers. When you think about the jobs you're doing, right, you are performing. So that's what performance psychology is. It's about taking those different concepts of sport and exercise psychology and applying into different settings more than anything. So from there, I did my PhD. That was, again, at University of Edinburgh, and I looked at positive youth development via sport, but very much from this coaching point of view. And at the time, I worked quite a lot as a swim coach and a swim teacher, and that gave me this, I guess, unique understanding of what happens on the field with the kids, with, you know, the teenagers, with the adults. And one of the reasons why I enjoyed teaching swimming was because I could go and read up things, you know, those papers, research studies, whatever I was learning, and then go out there and just try it out a little bit. And teaching was very much about having the psychological aspect as well. It's like talking someone in doing something, building their confidence, right? Really learning them to become better at what it is they do. So that was part of that. But at the same time, because I knew I was wanting to practice, I was wanting to be a practicing, you know, consultant psychologist, I didn't go the full pathway of registry, because in order to call yourself as a psychologist, there's quite a lot of hurdles in your way. And if you go different countries, different registrations, it's quite important to look at it early on, just to understand what it takes more than anything. But I did a professional training with a different sports body, and that allowed me to pick sports psychologist as one of the things. But it's mostly having someone to supervise your work. You go and do extra studying, you work with the clients, but you've got this almost safety network around you, who is called your supervisor. And you come in and say, hey, my client is experiencing this. I don't know what to do. I don't know what's happening, right? And I worked with a couple of drivers during that time as well. It was very handy to have my supervisor with me as well. I went to some race weekends, and so it happened that my supervisor was at the same race weekend with his client as well. So it's really nice, just kind of chat to him. I was like, oh my goodness, this is what's happening. What do I do now? So that's part of the training. And yeah, that's what you need to do more than anything. I guess you need to prepare yourself for quite a long journey, and it's more about being passionate what it is you do. If you don't have that motivation and sincere interest, I don't think it's going to last. And that's true for like any profession you choose. You know, look at medicine, like you really have to be into that in order to make it work. It's just so long. Psychology is very similar.
Is there any I guess maybe, I don't know if the word's reason or value, or do you need to be or have been an athlete yourself to then pursue a career in sports psychology or sports science? Does that help in any way?
Okay. Technically, no. Practically, absolutely. Because you understand sport better. You experienced that. You experience what it means to go to training early, what to go to competition, to the training camps. You understand what it takes to get there. You can connect with people you work better. If you're coached or you've got some sort of coaching, you know, qualification, experience, it's easier to get at least some experience in that field and then start building connections and realizing, hey, by the way, I also do strength and conditioning, right? You've got this easier access to people who might be interested in your services. You've got this easier access to really pursue your passions and to understand what the field needs. So I think that's very important. And someone once told me, someone took a workshop back in the UK during my training. They said, you know, the athletes or people who are going to hire you as a professional, they don't care what you know. All they care is that you care about them. So it's about building that connection with a person. That's important. You might be an excellent expert in what it is you do, but if you can't deliver that, if you don't have this person, you can't build this personal connection to the clients you work with, it's not going to happen.
And interestingly, because a lot of drivers are male, do you find it can be a little bit challenging to build those kind of connections with them because you might not understand, or there might be a lot of male ego involved? I guess that's what I'm trying to get across in these situations, because they are athletes and it does all boil down to their performance. So yeah, how do you go with connecting with predominantly male drivers?
It's a very loaded question. Let's put it this way.
Yes, because I just said, well, how do you deal with their ego? Sorry.
It's a very loaded question. You know, those who I work with, who come to me, and I'm in very lucky position that I can choose who I work with. They want to improve. And blame, I don't know, tell me that I'm Eastern European and put any other excuse to me, I can be bold. And sometimes we just need this boldness. And sometimes we just need someone to listen and to see this more emotional side of them and to normalize that. Because what's bubbling underneath there is not necessarily big egos. It's a lot of, you know, masking things. It's a lot of trying to be part of the culture, part of the picture, but not all of them are like this. So it's really understanding what we do. And I know some people come to me from other professionals, other sports psychologists, saying like they just don't understand the sport. So once you understand the sport, once you understand the context, once you know what's happening out there, once you start bringing more experience, little stories, and I say, oh, she knows what she's talking about. That competence helps. And then being able to sometimes just shake them like this also helps.
Get them to put their helmet on, so then you can just hit them over the head slightly. Yeah.
No helmet needed.
So you've recently joined the Girls on Track program as a champion as well. You attended your first event in Sydney last year, which is where we met. And yeah, I've learned only just a fraction of what incredible knowledge and expertise you had in this area. So it would have been Inspire for the younger girls. So that we're currently talking about pathways and how you actually pursue a certain career. How do you feel about being part of the Girls on Track program?
I'm very excited. I'm very, very excited because I feel that I can actually contribute some of my knowledge and experience to upcoming generations and really help them to not necessarily follow, you know, sports psychology as the path, but just to help them to become better people and to help them to navigate, you know, the world of, so what's next? What do I do? What do I want to do? Where do I want to go? And just being part of that. I always enjoy working with young people, and it's just greater opportunity to just be reminded how appreciative we should be of what it is we've got, what we achieved, but also of upcoming generations.
And also part of Pathways, which is moving towards mentoring, and you'll be part of that mentoring program and mentoring a few older girls. So any tips or advice if they're looking to explore your career path?
It's always good to have interest in something, in sport, in motorsport, insert here. And for me, it's really about trying to understand what you like. And sometimes that comes through understanding what it is you don't like. And, you know, we live in the days where your future career your position might be not existing now, and you'll be the one who will create that. So I really want girls to think outside the box a little bit and pursue what it is they're interested in, and just exploring different, I don't know, degrees, avenues, however you call it, by experience, by trying to do something, by reaching out, by talking to different people and learning more about what that profession is. Even in exercise sports sciences at University of Sydney and any other university I've worked at, so many people drop out because they don't understand that it's actually science. There's going to be maths, it's going to be biomechanics, there's going to be sports psychology, it's going to be nutrition. It's just going to be so many different aspects. Some people come in hoping to kick a ball around, and we don't get it. Right? So it's different. In psychology, so many people drop out, after the first year, because we didn't expect psychology to be so science as well. There's almost maths involved, that we do so many different things. It's not clinical psychology, we maybe just sit down and chat and just have this nice conversation. It's far from, in order to get there. So just getting a better understanding what it is and what it is we're interested in, or not.
And this might be a little bit of a tricky one, because same as me, I didn't study over here. And I know I get this question quite a lot, like what should I study in high school to then prepare myself for, sort of going on to a degree. So from my understanding of what you've said, it's definitely maths, science. Is there anything else you'd recommend that girls should be looking at studying sort of at a high school level to kind of put them in good stead?
I literally had first-year students doing exercise sports science. Some of them came in without doing maths for like a number of years, and that's okay. So yes, potentially you want to learn a little bit more maths and physics at school, whatever it is, but you don't have to. Right? So you need to be prepared to pick it up, to potentially spend a little bit more time exploring those subjects. But once you want to go into university, there is support. And university today and university when I was a student, it's very different. Students get a lot of support. We really, really do, but we have to reach out for that. We have to go and figure it out. And potentially one of the things which I would recommend from, its lecturer's point of view, working with students and young people, it's mostly that you have to be willing to put a little bit more effort into that to find out things. So it's a lot of like figuring out how it works and where to find it rather than just being given it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's you need that inquisitive mind, and want to, as you say, it's anything, isn't it? As you said at the very beginning, it's your passion that's going to drive you forward in not only, I think, so many professions, but motorsport definitely in particular, because it's a lifestyle. It's not so much a job. But then obviously, yes, as sports psychologist and sports scientist, as you say, it's a long journey. And you need to really be driven by your passion, and that you've got your end game in mind, which is exactly what you said you did. But yes, let's move on to see if there are any questions.
I'll just jump in. Yeah, there's one that kind of ties into what you both just been talking about. And it's, if I have no expertise in motorsport, should I still apply for a job in it? And I think, Charlie, you've kind of summed that up, but if any of you want to add anything else.
I guess for me, if you have no expertise in motorsport, the question is, are you still interested in that? And probably you are, right? Because you're here asking that question. Expertise comes with time and experience. So for example, race drivers, they have to know quite a lot about engineering, car, tires. They're not experts in that. They have to pick it up and learn and develop that as they go, but it doesn't stop them from being there. So that expertise develops the more time and effort you spent in that field. Should it stop you from applying it? Probably not. Would you get a job, a paid job? I don't know. Would you get some volunteering experience? Probably yes. And that's the way to go, right? It's trying to find those opportunities.
100%. The same person has asked, are there any books you would recommend for helping develop, improve, or performance mindset? That's a good one.
There are a lot of books. Some of them are better than others. There are quite a lot of easy reads as well as quite a few more of academic books. It really depends on what it is you're after more than anything. What I'll do, I'll look up some resources which I think are a little bit better and pass it on to Priyanka, so maybe you can just post it as part of the resource. But I can't recommend any now from at the top of my head. I don't want to recommend bad ones.
No,
There's a lot of pressure in that, isn't there?
no, that's absolutely fine. You can shoot me an email and I'll pass it on. There's another one here from Nadine Armstrong, who is a Girls on Track ambassador. Thanks for your question, Nadine, and hello. How does the client's age maturity change how you work with them? So if it's someone, you know, they're younger, they maybe feel like they're more invincible and bolder, and older might be wiser. So how do you work with them?
It really depends, not only on age maturity, but on many different things. So some drivers, and not even drivers, generally speaking, people have different conditions which we don't know about, we don't see, and they might be a little bit slower readers, they might be more visual, right? So that really depends, that really influences how you present information. I'm conscious that I'm not a native speaker, I've got a strong accent, Aussies are not used to that, right? So you're putting in a little bit more conscious mind, how you go about, how you deliver. Some young drivers are very, very switched on to the points like, are you sure that you're 15, 16? It's like, it can't be right. And some who are like, 20, 25 can be very, very hot-headed that way. And yes, and that does influence how you work with them, the approach you're going to take, different areas you're going to address, and it changes a lot. And that's very important to understand your client and the environment more than anything.
Wow, that's a great answer. Another question here from Matthew. We focus constantly on the drivers. What level of understanding of sport and performance psychology should pit crew, race engineers, and even officials in race control, medical, rescue, recovery have?
Excellent question, Matthew. I've started my one.
A lot of it. If it was my my choice, I would make sure that everyone studies some sports and performance psychology at school, at university, because all of us need to learn how to deal with other people, right? And all the people you just mentioned in your question, they have to perform under pressure, right? So we need to know how to deal with that, how to deliver the best at very high stakes and very intense situations. Pit crew, like look at the pit crew and the fastest pit stop, right? Was it Red Bull, like 2 seconds or so? With how many people? I want to say around 15 people in it working together. So that's an example of how much sport and performance psychology that team needs. And yes, you're right, and marshals, officials, being constantly shouted at, especially at other sports such as football, European football, and so on, where referees taking so much blame. So you really need to learn how to deal with that. So it's a lot. In short, everyone.
This might be a question for both of you, actually. I'm working with grassroots level motorsport drivers teams with their media profiles. What is a great way to initiate the conversations regarding improving their profiles?
Charlie, how about you take this one?
Okay, so I'll be diplomatic on this one. I feel that there are, as Kotryna was saying earlier, there's definitely a difference between older and younger. So if you're dealing with a younger driver, male or female really, they more than likely have grown up in the age of social media and definitely understand it for its benefits that it can have, and maybe might be a little bit more welcoming, maybe aren't afraid to show so much personality and show themselves, and perhaps even show their lives outside of the racetrack, because if, you know, Drive to Survive has taught us anything, it's that there's so much hunger for what goes on off the racetrack. You know, even with our commercial partners, for example, gone are the days where, say, a sponsor wants a driver to, you know, hold their helmet and their race boots and, you know, walk down the track. They want them to jump in an everyday car and go pick up, you know, the shopping or, you know, that kind of thing, to show their personality and show who they are. And you might find that someone who's a little bit younger would embrace that a bit more, whereas someone who's a little bit older, it's not the way that they've done it before. So there might be a little bit of resistance there. However, I think that motorsport drivers understand better than anyone how commercial partnerships and money is absolute king in motorsport, because if you don't have the money, you cannot go driving, you cannot go racing. So they do understand to a degree that there's a need for it. It just depends perhaps how much of their personality or how much they might let you into their sort of sacred space, I guess. You've got to think that, you know, not everyone wants to share their entire lives. They want to have something personal to them as well. I hope that answered the question.
And I guess just to add, Charlotte, to your answer is that there's also the other side of the same coin, right? When people put too much of everything without filtering it out. So you really want to, I guess, be conscious what you put out there, in which words, in which context, because, you know, words have so much meaning, and it might be, you know, something you didn't intend, and yet it came across in a wrong way. And that can have really, you know, bad consequences. So you want to open up, you want to be you and who you are, but you're also building a brand. So you have to almost separate, you know, ways of personal, social media and what you do on your personal account. And you have to be very careful, because, you know, these days you can find out everything you want to. So it's almost, you know, it's a catch-22, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. And I think, you know, as an athlete, I think that you should keep a little bit of yourself to yourself, and any public person should keep something for themselves, definitely. But really, if you're the person trying to build that relationship with them, if you're trying to be their, you know, their PR, their media manager, however, it's really about, yeah, as Kotryna was saying earlier, about building that relationship, building that connection with them, and finding out what it is that they want, and find out how they want to express themselves and how they want to be seen in the world, and then matching it up to, yes, this is what your sponsors want. This is how your sponsor, like your main sponsor, there might be certain branding, there might be certain key messages, there might be things that they want. So, for instance, Red Bull have a very, very strong, they're adventure seekers, they're thrill seekers, they're sort of a little bit outside the square. You know, we see, you know, Brock Feeney dressing up in a superhero outfit, and he's okay to do that, but would maybe Shane Van Gisbergen do that? No, that's not what he would like to do. So I think there's definitely give and take in that relationship, but it all boil down to you both having trust in each other, that you genuinely want the best, not only for the athlete, but for the sport as well, and to really grow the fan base, because that's how we all stay in jobs and get to keep doing the sport that we genuinely love.
Fantastic. This is kind of an open-ended question. Any tips for someone trying to get into motorsport at an older age?
I guess the question is what exactly you're trying to do, right? So there's so many different roles and how you're trying to get involved. So we need a little bit more information in order to answer.
Yeah, I think the one thing we consistently say is volunteer, right, Charlie? Is get into officiating. It's the best way to start.
Absolutely. You know, I met some fantastic women in Townsville. It was the first all-female scrutineering team. And those women have not only got decades of experience, but three of them did. And there was one lady that had been there only a couple of years. And yeah, you get up close with race cars. If you love race cars and want to be in the thick of it, you get to be right up there with them. All of the top 10 shootout cars have to come to the scales, and you're part of taking those measurements to ensure that they meet regulation. So there's a lot of mature age women in roles like that, because there's so much community around officiating, and it's something that you're welcomed with open arms. So yes, and I think if you don't know where you want to go in motorsport, officiating or volunteering is definitely the way to go, because you'll get a taste of all these different roles within motorsport, and you might be able to narrow down where you might like to head as well.
And it might be simple as just attending an event, right? So it's, if you live somewhere nearby the race circuit, look it up when's the next event, go watch, start talking to people, how did they get into that? And people are very, very welcoming. The community is so welcoming, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I can tell you sorry, Priyanka, I can tell you heaps of stories about, just being welcomed with open arms, and just absolutely. Just do it. Just turn up and do it.
Yeah, I've been involved in a few sports, and the motorsport community is just remarkable. Love it. Can't stop talking about it. Always puts a big smile on my face. Next question, which is another interesting one. I'm currently in year 12 studying human biology and exercise science. Next year, I'm going on to study remedial massage, as this is something I'm interested in. I'm very passionate about motorsport, and I'd like to work with drivers and teams in terms of remedial massage. How do I go about doing this? Volunteering.
Essentially, it is volunteering, but also figuring out, is there a niche, do we do that? Is it something of interest or not? What is of interest, for example, in Europe? Was a big niche over here, it was sports science. It just starting to develop in Australia, sports psychology especially, and all those services being offered to motorsport, they're just not there. And I think people want that. People want to be better, they just don't really know where to find out more about that. So it's really figuring out where to volunteer, who with, and whether they're interested in it.
Charlie, do you have anything to add?
Oh, no, I was going to say, just adding to what Kotryna said about making connections. And again, it goes back to volunteering, getting yourself to a racetrack, having conversations. Obviously, being in year 12, that can be really, really daunting. So perhaps reach out to a Girls on Track champion, and we can always go with you to a racetrack and be the conduit for you to start those conversations.
Yeah, absolutely. I sent the person a message saying, email us on Girls on Track at motorsport.org.au, and we can sort it out, because now we have a bunch of champions who are on board. I think there's 22 now, which is amazing. So there's definitely someone out there who can help you. Another question from Nadine. Compared to, say, 10 years ago, we've seen the conversations around respect and equality at the forefront of motorsport. How have your conversations with clients grown or developed in this regard?
It's an excellent question. From staff point of view, and I think staff is potential a little bit more important here. It's a little bit more open-mindedness more than anything. So when we worked with W Series, so it was the first ever female only racing league, right? So the conversations we had with my colleagues as members of staff was, what language do we use? Can we say ladies? Do we say girls? Do we say drivers? Just say drivers, similar, just say drivers, right? Do we use pink color? Do we use different color? Like, would you use pink for male drivers? No. So why would you change it for, female drivers then? So it becomes much more of, right, okay, so how do we do stuff within this staff point of view? Within the drivers themselves, I don't know if they care that much who they're racing. At least I haven't come across anyone in my short career in motorsport who would really say or be prejudiced against female race driver in comparison to a male driver. I really haven't. But again, I can't read my minds. I can't talk to every single person. So I don't know, but I think it's becoming a little bit more respectful culture, generally speaking, because drivers come in, male drivers, and say, I'm actually quite emotional. This is how I am. I don't like this tough person being put on me. And that's how motorsport has always been for years. And I think it's just changing a little bit, but sport is changing.
Again, Charlie, both of us just shocked. Another question. Before pressure moments for your athletes, are there any exercises you have them to help them get in the zone?
Absolutely. And the zone is such a thing. It depends what your zone is. And that's one of the things which we need to figure out first. Are you one of those people who get too tight, too anxious, and actually needs to chill for a little bit? Or you're just a little bit not with it and you need just to build yourself up, right? So doing a little bit of physical activity, doing reaction exercises were designed just to build yourself up a little bit. But it's all about what you think about, right? You can do breathing exercise, which is very simple, just to help you to bring your heart rate down a little bit. Changing your focus from, oh my goodness, I'm so anxious, will I come first or second, to, okay, so what do I need to do? What is my goal for this race? And really breaking it, this big beast, into smaller steps and smaller manageable steps, what to think about. So really just shifting that focus. And that's a very easy thing to say, but quite difficult to develop, because first of all, you need to know what you're thinking about before you can change it, right? So I would say starting even with breathing exercises as a very quick check-in point with yourself, how you feel, it's a good start.
Was anyone else taking notes then? I was. But breathing exercises, yeah, okay, because I'm going to do this pre-race now in everyday life. Fantastic. Sorry, Priyanka, just jumped in there.
No, I think, yeah. To you to wrap up. We don't have any more questions. So yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Well, yes, thank you so much for everyone for listening, and to Dr. Kotryna for her advice. Of course, if you would like to connect with Kotryna and the possibility of being mentored, as we previously mentioned, please get in touch with Girls on Track at motorsport.org.au. Upcoming events as well, Girls on Track will be at Sandown, there'll be Port Melbourne Go-Kart Track, Bathurst, Perth, Adelaide. So registrations, make sure you head to www.motorsport.org.au. I got that correct, didn't I?
/Girls on Track.
/Girls on Track. I knew I was going to get quite there. So make sure you keep your eye on that, and obviously all of their social channels for registrations, both individual and for schools. Priyanka, thank you so much. It's been an absolute honour to host my very first Girls on Track webinar. I hope you'll have me back.
Amazing job, both of you. Thank you so much. That was really good.
Thank you all for your wonderful questions. Nadine, as always, another Girls on Track ambassador. We love you, and we cannot wait to see you all trackside very, very soon.
Thanks very much for having me. It's been absolutely a pleasure, and the questions have been very interesting and insightful. I hope it provided you some food for thought more than anything, and maybe more questions than answers, but that's why we're here, right?
Absolutely. Thank you, everyone. Good night. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.